Hello for the sixth Sunday in Ordinary Time, using only the gospel reading from today, which is Luke 6:17, verse 17, and verses 20 to 26. And Friday's reading of the first reading, which is from the book of Genesis 3:1 to 8. And I title this The Way It Was, dot, 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 is, dot, 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 and will be, exclamation point, dot, 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 dot. Hmm. You know, with the weekday group, very often I say, especially on Friday, I say, it's interesting because some of these Friday readings seem to implement the coming Sunday's reading, or they complement the Sunday's reading. And I think it's really true this week once again. And that's that reading from Genesis 1 to 8. Um, and I'm talking, that one has to do with the way it was until Adam and Eve's story. And the way it was God created everything, and God created men and women, and they who evolved or on the spot, whatever he did it. But we have the Adam and Eve story, which talks about the way it was for them in the Garden of Paradise and what happened. And we know that Eve was attracted to the fruit of the tree in the middle of the paradise, and she ate it, and then she offered it to Eve. Adam and Eve ate it, and boom, that story classically talks about how evil came into creation. And that story is the Adam and Eve story. Don't blame God. Blame men, women, and children. Blame creation. And so all week we've been going the way it was until boom, on Friday, our first parents sinned. And it's no longer the way God created it. And it still isn't. So the way it was seems to be still the way it is today. Even at the time of Christ. Well, when Christ came, he gave a replan or a new plan or the way it is starting now, and finally how well it will be at the end. So Jesus Christ, he didn't do the Sermon on the Mount, he did the Sermon on the level ground, as it says this week. And when I looked at what Christ said, and he tells it in sort of poetic language too, the blessed are those in the Sermon on the Mount, and as far as here in today's gospel, he talks about 4 or 5 different things as what you have to experience now: poverty, hunger, weeping, excluded and hated and denounced, insulted, sinning against you, all these things, and you and I sinning against the others, insulting them. The way the world is not the way it was. It is not the way that it was created by God himself and to the image and likeness. So Jesus comes, and here he is on the sermon on, I call level ground, sounds crazy, on level ground, but he talks about hang in there, baby. I'm talking about the world that you should try to be now and the way it will be in the future. So he compares all these things about poverty and hunger and weeping and hatred and exclusion and insulting people. Throw in war, throw in suffering. It's the way it is now, mixed up with some good, some forgiveness, and some charity, and some love. But the way it will be, it's what? He's sort of the opposite. He starts out with another list toward the bottom of today's reading and so forth. You wind up getting the kingdom of God. You will be satisfied. You will be laughing. You will be rewarded. Your reward will be great in heaven. And you're going to be like the prophets of old. They suffered death. You know, a prophet's reward was John the Baptist, cut off his head for trying to preach the message of Jesus. That's the way it was. That's the way it is now, this mixture of what I just said. And the way it will be, he calls the kingdom of God. Hang in there and try to help make it become what Jesus Christ himself talks about what will be. Finally and quickly, it's sort of in the last 2 weeks, 3 of good priest friends of mine died and were buried or will be buried this week. It's sort of interesting. You know, way back a few months ago and so forth, we had this Father Norman here in our community. Not that him. I'll talk about him in a minute. But as far as there was this priest that taught me in the seminary, Father Jimmy Quill, died at 94 or 96. It's no longer will be, it is where he is. Wow. And when I was talking about this funeral about Jimmy Quill, I got a call right after that back from a friend about talking about the deceased Father Quill, but a priest 3 years older than I from the parish where I entered the seminary, Johnny Riesenberg, he died. I thought, oh my gosh, my gosh. And then as far as the Father Osberg from our retirement center a couple weeks ago, he died. The way they lived, their life here and now is over. I think they're out of town, out of time, not out of town. They're out of town and they're out of time. And they're with God himself. They're not waiting around. They're with God himself. And they're laughing. And they're in the kingdom of God. And we're still here. Back to Father Norman Fisher, our local priest, 51 years old, died in bed, I think it was, a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago. He was a good priest. I came in election in 1969, and the death of a priest in this community since 1969 in our diocese, Covington and now Lexington Diocese, I have never heard of any more complimentary messages and insinuendos and talking about this good priest, Father Norman Fisher. My 4th person I'm thinking about dying is I'm taking the place of Father Fisher on Tuesday, having one of the funerals that he would have had on Tuesday. It gives a lot of thought to, you don't have to be 90s to die. You don't have to be 80s to die and be transferred. Life is changed, not ended. You can be any age, and we all go through this in this life right now. The kingdom of God will come. The kingdom of God has begun. And all of these 4 priests, I think, they are in the kingdom of God. No more poverty, no more suffering, no more whatever that is negative. Think about that. Think about that. the way it was, the way it is, and the way it will be. Do you believe that? It takes faith. It takes divine help for you